Every conversation is different, but every awkward silence is exactly the same. There's two things that run through all of our minds, including mine, and that is, this is an awkward silence, and this thing I'm thinking of saying, it's not good enough. And that's what this video is for. I've got some ways to come up with questions. I've got some ways to say the stuff that you have this feeling holding you back from saying. I've got a daily thing which you could choose to do, which will build your skills at doing this. We've got all sorts of stuff in this video and it all works for me. When it comes to questions like, what did you do this weekend? I actually have a friend who I really enjoy talking to. They're really fun to talk to. And they were just like, how was your weekend one time in conversation? And they did it twice or something. And they did all these other questions like weekend plans and what are you doing on the holidays? And do you have any siblings? All these questions which are boring. But was the conversation boring? Hell nah. On top of that, these questions are 5% of the conversation. What I remember from that conversation, sure I remember these questions because I was paying attention to it because I noticed it because it was, I don't know, I make videos on this stuff. I may have noticed it, but what I also remembered was how my friend made me feel. You know, we don't remember what you say, we don't remember what you do, we remember how you made me feel. And that comes from the body of the conversation, not these little 5% conversation starters. So when you're starting these conversations, you can memorize a few, conversation starters. You can use FORWARD, the acronym, and you can also ask about the past and the present. So FORWARD stands for family, occupation, relationship, dreams. I spam that stuff, and I have a bit of a roster, a bit of a rotation. I don't overuse the same ones, because if you use the same ones, people fall into scripts. If you hear, how are you? You have a prepared response, good, how are you? And so you automatically slip into doing that instead of giving a good answer, which is actually detailed, that the other person can follow up on. It's just in a single conversation, if you use the same question 3 times, that's no good. People are just going to be like, oh, he's just making conversation. He's not actually interested in talking. And they'll kind of switch off when they hear these questions multiple times. And an even more effective thing to do than this is to just for literally 30 seconds to a minute before you go in to talk to someone, just not before the social event, have a think what did I talk about this person last time? What have they been up to recently? Is there anything they were talking about last time that I'm interested in? So you're basically just instead of scrolling on your phone and just not having any room to think thoughts, you're actually just thinking about the people you're about to talk to, and you'll come up with all these questions that you want to ask, and then you just memorize them and just ask them in conversation whenever it gets boring. And they're gonna be so happy. They're gonna be like, oh wow, he remembered. And when you say all this stuff, how you say it matters way more than what you say. So if you say oh, I remember you had that concert thing that you went to, was that any good? You know what that sounds like to me? I don't care about your stupid concert. What sounds better is, oh, I remember you had that concert. How was that? Was it good? That seems a lot better if you ask me. So you could ask the most boring question, but if you ask it in an interested way, you're just expressing the signal, I am interested in hearing about this topic. Please tell me more. In that way, every question is basically the same. And that question always works because they will then tell you more, just like you were after, right? So it doesn't really matter what you say, it's how you say it. And so that should also help you remember to just say what is on your mind and use those conversation things that I've just said to come up with stuff, better stuff. You can also restrict yourself to the last little bit of conversation. If you've been talking for 10 minutes, you're going to be overwhelmed with all these questions that you could ask because there's just so much. It's paralysis of choice. It's like trying to choose an ice cream flavor. What you can do, just like when you're choosing ice cream flavors, you just go I'm just going to ignore that little area over there. In all honesty, I wouldn't do that. I'd just spend 10 minutes trying to pick an ice cream flavor. But in awkward silences, we don't have 10 minutes. And so you just go okay, I'm just going to think about the last little bit of conversation, the last couple things they said, and restrict yourself to that when you're kind of thinking. And that can be a good mental model, I think, to think of questions better, follow-up questions better. So now you will have something in your mind ready to say, but you're still just going to probably have that problem of I don't have the balls to say it. It's just hard. It's a hard thing to do, especially if you don't have perfect confidence. And ultimately, I think it just comes down to like discipline, or just like going for it, being impulsive and saying it anyway. But there is some ways in which you can make this easier. The first one is to relax. So if you're in an awkward silence and you're like this, it's going to be very hard to get out the words. But if you just relax a little bit, you breathe out and you smile, that will just like regulate your emotions for you. So it's gonna dim down the anxiety a little bit. Another thing you can do is you can have like a brief like thought that you think. What do I mean by this? Like you might have like a thought that works for you. It might be like, they're thinking more about themselves than me. You just use that thought. Like you probably already doing this unconsciously. Like you just use that, and you don't have to think out the entire words. Like they're thinking more than me. You just like feel the essence of the thought and let that fill you with strength to go say the thing. So just have a look around and think for something that like really works for you, works well. Like might be like they're thinking more about themselves than me. Like I'm gonna feel really good about myself afterwards if I say this. It can be whatever. And the last thing is you have to know that you have to act straight away. You can't wait. The longer you wait, the harder it gets. So once you have that understanding, it's gonna be like, as soon as you have a thought, you go like, oh, I have to say this right now. And that'll help you do it. Another important thing to do is just to stay like switched on during the conversation before awkward silences happen, because once they've happened, it's already a bit late. What you could have done is just actually like kind of tried harder to listen to what they were saying. Not always possible, it'll drain your social battery faster, but I've found that I kind of have been falling into kind of habits of being lazy in conversation. So there's one specific person I talk to at my work who I do not like talking to, right? And so when I talk to them, I noticed this just this week, I've fallen into the habit of just like basically not asking questions because I don't care about what they have to say, and just like yapping about stuff that I find interesting does not make for good conversation. And so, you know, if I wanted to avoid awkward silences, I would think about like any areas of my life, any people I talk to, any specific scenarios, situations, like environments where I've fallen into a bit of a habit. Maybe at like your classes, you fall into a habit of doing work too much and not talking to people enough. So just look for those habits and try to break out of them. So ultimately, you're trying to make all this stuff a habit. You're trying to have like a process to think of questions easier, which I've described, and you're trying to get better at having the discipline, I guess, to actually say that stuff. And you know how you build habits? By actually practicing. So maybe when you're talking to your family, maybe once a day, or, you know, a couple times a week, you're gonna, like, just to practice this stuff, you're gonna try thinking of good questions to ask, conversation starters. And just for like 30 seconds, just like lock in and think of a question really quickly and say that question. And another really good thing that I recommend to do when it comes to building that kind of discipline to just impulsively do stuff straight away is just yell. So when you're in public, like, probably don't do it in a house. When you're just like walking along and there's no one like right next to you that you're gonna startle, just go like, yeah, just like yell like yeehaw, something like really loud, or like banana really loud. Like, it sounds easy, but it's so hard. Like, I struggle to yell at like the top of my voice still, because like something about it, there's just this anxiety there. And that's a good time to practice, relax, smile, think that brief thought, do it straight away, don't wait. And over time, you'll improve your ability to do that, and that will transfer over to improving your conversations.